This is Marianne from the Wagon Quilt Company, and today we're going to be doing a demo on block 6 of the Homegrown Block of the Month by Sue Spargo. And we're going to be doing 5 different stitches, and hopefully I'll be able to figure them out and do them right. I'm going to move the camera down and so you can see my hands just a little bit better. And hopefully you can get some helpful hints as we go along. With a lot of these stitches, I have to have my book out. It's not something I always can just do off the top of my head. And there's a period between when I do them, and so I have to either have the book out or, look them up or something. This first one I'm gonna do is a trellis stitch, and it's actually quite dramatic. Here are some in Sue Spargo's book, but I find that it's better to use a thread that's not really skinny because it takes forever to do the trellis stitch to fill in the space. So I would suggest using a little bit heavier one. This one that I'm using today is a number 5, and you need to have quite a long thread because you want to do the whole stitch without stopping if possible. What I've done is made a little circle here with my thread, and it's not perfect, but I've done a back stitch around a circle. And a lot of times when you're doing a circle, you're doing it around the edge of a piece that's been appliqued on. And so you don't actually have to draw it. Now, Sue Spargo does have these new Circle Easy template sets that she's marketing. And she also has ovals, triangles, squares, and hexagons. And I'm not going to open it because it will look opened once I open it, but it has 1 inch, 1 1/4, 1 1/2, 1 3/4, 2, 2 1/4, 2 1/2, 2 3/4, and 3. So it has the little templates in plastic for each of those sizes. So you can just draw right around them with your white or pencil or whatever you're using. So those are kind of nice. I've done my circle here, and I've kind of done it randomly, but I think it'll work for this project right here. I've done this with 1 thread, and then I am going to come up with a new thread so I have enough. And I think Sue Spargo, I don't know if she comes up in the middle or, but I'm going to bring it up right here next to a stitch.
Oh, I thought you meant in the middle of the stitch. She goes between.
Yeah, between the stitches.
Between the stitches.
And then you're going to be putting your needle through each of these little back stitches that you've made. And instead of doing like a buttonhole stitch, you're actually wrapping it the other way, the opposite way. So I'm going to put my needle in and then wrap it around counterclockwise. Okay. And then as I pull it, it makes a little knot. See the little knot it makes? So I'll put my needle through the back stitch, and I'm working from left to right as I go around, and then I'm going to do it counterclockwise around my needle and pull it so it makes a little knot. And I will go in each of the back stitches all the way around the circle. So it takes me just a little bit of time to do all these stitches. And I don't have a fast forward on the video, so we'll just do it here. I'm going to go all the way around this circle, going in every back stitch, making this little knot. And it really doesn't look like anything until you have a couple of rows going, and then it will start forming a pattern. Now, Terry, you've done it before, and how did it work for you?
I thought it was fun. It worked really well. Mine was it felt mine was a little more looser than that one. So I made my second loops, I guess, a little bigger or something. It didn't feel like it was quite as tight. I can't remember.
Right. Now I've gone around each of the back stitches, and now I'm going to keep going, but instead of going into the back stitch, I'm going into the little loop that was made from the stitch that I made going into each of those loops. But I'm going to continue doing the same thing, wrapping it around counterclockwise. And I think the hardest part with this is just figuring out where the little loops are. Sometimes you kind of have to pull it apart.
Yeah, and I think I didn't pull mine as snug or something, because mine was a little bit looser.
And maybe your back stitches were bigger as you started too.
It may have been, because it was the sun that we were doing.
So there's my next one, I think.
That's the hard part, is to see them sometimes.
It is.
Yeah.
And you may have to get, you know, a stronger glasses or some kind of a lamp that you can see a little bit easier. Hi ladies.
Hello.
We are doing the trellis stitch right now. And it does take just a bit of time because we continue to go around this circle. And as I go in these little loops that are made from the past one, I'm gonna do counterclockwise, wrap it around the needle and then pull it through, and it makes a little knot. But we might all have to get a little bit of pair of glasses as we're doing this. The first row that you do, it feels like it's kind of falling outwards instead of inwards, but as you do the second one and the third one, you get a better feel for it coming into the middle. I have to just kind of pull it apart a little to see where my next stitch is going to go. And wrap it again counterclockwise. Okay, I've gone around twice now, and I'm gonna start on my third row. And it's starting to build up into the center of the circle. This is a variegated thread that I'm using right here. So the colors will change as I go around in this circle. And it's not especially hard, it's just a little bit time consuming. The only thing hard, like I mentioned, is finding that next loop. And sometimes I may not get it in the perfect place, but I think it still works. You may find that as you're going towards the center, you may have to decrease. You may, if it gets too, you know, pointy or starting to look like a volcano, you may have to skip a stitch and keep going. Anybody have better eyes than me? Probably all of you.
Not me.
Last time I went, they said, well, it looks like you might be starting to get some cataracts. My brother had them in his 50s.
I just had one eye done not too long ago.
Did ya?
Mm-hmm. I haven't had the other one done yet.
Starting. I'm starting to.
But that's not why I'm blind.
It's not so fun to get old, is it?
It's so fun.
Okay, well, I'm gonna just wrap these, and then I think we'll have the idea. The thing is, until you get 2 or 3 or 4 rows, it's kind of hard to tell what it's gonna look like. I'm gonna finish my 3rd here. And sometimes you can see these in the picture in the Sue Spargo book. She's gone all the way to the center. But you'll see in some of her projects that she actually will stop and leave like a volcano hole in the middle. And they look pretty also.
So this one has a change of thread color.
It does. And I'm not sure if I don't think it's it's not just variegated. I think there's a change, but it is difficult to make that change because you have to sink it. It's much better if you can continue with just one thread, because I've found that when I had to stop and put another thread on there, that sometimes I can see it. It pulls down a little bit more. Okay, I'm gonna finish this 3rd row of circles, and we can go to the next stitch. So if you wanted, you could continue until the whole thing is full. So it would probably take me 3 more rounds of all of those, and I may have to skip one every once in a while so it doesn't become a volcano. But I can sink this and just leave it like that if I want, and leave a hole in the middle. And for some things that looks really cool.
It does. It looks cute.
Okay, that's a trellis stitch, and I'm going to do the other hard one next, and that's turkey work. And turkey work isn't one that I've done very much.
What do we do that one on?
A lot of times Sue Spargo will use turkey work in the center of something, like in the center of a flower. And let me go to the page here on 144. And this would be an example right here of turkey work.
And then you trim it. We did that on
you
the
do
rabbit
that. You do
tail, on
trim
the
it.
rabbit in the garden.
So you
We
could
do
do
that
it
one.
in a circle if you wanted, or you can do it in any shape. And basically what you're doing is making a little carpet and then trimming it down. She has you come up and make a knot. So essentially what you're doing, just by making a little stitch, okay? What you're essentially doing is making a loop, and then you're making a stitch that holds it down. So I'm going to almost do like a back stitch, come back to where I ended that one. Or a stem stitch, I guess that would be called a stem stitch. And I'm going to leave a loop right here. And then when I make my second stitch, I'm going to come in where I ended this loop and back to this one, and that anchors it, okay? So the next one, I'm going to take a little back stitch with a loop, and then another back stitch in that little area that's unstitched, and that will make, pull that one tight. So that one's going to anchor it. So every other one is an anchor. There's a loop and an anchor. And a loop. And an anchor. So I'm not doing any shape very well here, but let's do one more. Let's do a loop. And an anchor. And then if I want to do an area, what I'm going to do is start again and do another row really close to this one. So I can do a loop, and an anchor, and a loop. We're trying to make the loops all the same size, but you know, it doesn't always happen perfectly. There's a loop and an anchor. And a loop. And an anchor. And I can come back and do another row. So what I've done right here is 4 rows of loops and anchors. And then I'm just going to start trimming this. This is the fun part. I'm going to trim all those little loops. Sue Spargo does have a little tool that you can use to fluff this up. I'm not sure what it's called, a turkey work brush or something. But you see how I've made like a little carpet right there? And then what I can do is trim it down so it's the height that I want.
We do it on the rabbit tail, so it's a teeny tiny little,
one.
in the
This
tiny
is
little
heavier
area.
thread, right?
You know, I think it's kind of better to use something that's a little bit fuzzy. Even a yarn or something. She uses a specialty thread that I don't have available to me, but you could use another kind of thread if you wanted. This is actually the painter's thread, and it's a softer one. I can't remember what they call it. This one's called Marianne, see?
There you go.
It's not that it's my thread, it's actually,
Well,
that's actually
we
the
do it on
color.
that little rabbit tail that's in the garden,
Okay.
so I just use regular white thread.
You can, yeah.
But if you were using something bigger, you would use like a yarn type
I
thread.
would, something a little fatter maybe. And you could shape this too, and so it's shorter on the edges than it is in the middle, so it makes like a little bump. And some of the people suggest maybe using a little eyebrow brush to kind of fluff it up. But that is what your turkey work will look like.
Okay.
But you don't have to cut it if you don't want to.
You
right?
could do whatever you want. Yeah. There you go. Okay, let's go to our next one. Maybe I'll just use this thread since I'm there. Okay, the star stitch, and I'm just going to get the page here for everybody watching also. It's 170. And the star stitch is really similar to another one we've done, which I can't remember the name. But if we had a circle, we might be doing it in a circular pattern. And I'm going to first start by doing a long stitch from one side of the circle to the next. And do it at 6 o'clock, 12 o'clock, 3 o'clock, and 9 o'clock. So I form a plus right here. And then I'm going to do one in between those two. And because they are kind of loose, then Sue Spargo recommends that you come in really close and go over the top and make a little tack stitch that tacks them down in the middle.
Just once.
So that's called your star stitch.
Well, that's easy enough.
You could also do the same thing and when I do it this way, I usually like to come into the middle. It makes a little bit bigger hole. But if you want, you can do it by just pick and stabbing. So instead of bringing your thread all the way to the end, you're just going to go from the outside into the middle on each stitch. I didn't do it perfectly, but you kind of get the idea. And that one's not done very well, but you can see on this one that it makes a little hole, and sometimes you can pull it tight and it's almost like a little eyelet in the middle. So you could do them, they pretty much look the same when they're done. And that is a star stitch.
And that's not the one she weaves around then?
You can, yeah. Yeah, that's exactly what you're doing when you weave around them too. And let me get another piece of thread here. The weeder stitch is on page 172. And what I did with the last group is show them the cheater way that I did it when I first didn't know how to do it. Weeder, when I was doing like crazy quilting and stuff like that, I'd look at the pictures and then just try to replicate the stitches, but I didn't have like a stitch guide always. And so the way that I did the weeder stitch was simply to do a chain stitch, and I'm doing these kind of big just because it's easier for you to see them. And then I went back and made the little arms that make it a wheat ear. And I'm going into this place right here at the very top of the chain. Anyway, that's one way you can do something that looks like the weeder. You see how that
I like the
looks?
chain in the middle. Hers doesn't have the chain in the middle, is that?
It does, but the weeder's done a little differently. Let me get another thread here.
Oh, I guess it does. I hate to point in your video, but yeah, I see.
No, you're good. You're supposed to talk and point. If I can get it threaded. So the other way to do the weeder, and I'm going to do it next to it here. I've got to start down here. Okay, let's do it this way. So I'm going to start by making the little arms in a V. And then I'm going to come down a stitch length and weave my thread through those two little arms and back down.
Oh.
And that makes what looks like a chain. So I like to keep my little arms about halfway between the top and the bottom of each chain. So I'm going to make my arms and then come down a stitch length and then weave my thread through those previous arms up there and bring them down.
So which way do you like doing that the best?
This is faster to me.
Is it?
Uh-huh. But this is actually the accurate way to do it. But if you look at them both, it's almost hard to distinguish one from the other.
If you're using the variegated thread, it sort of makes
It looks like you're
it,
changing colors. Huh?
yeah, it changes as you go instead of, yes.
So that's a really fun one. And the last one, I think, if we get them all, is the threaded back stitch. And first of all, you're going to do a back stitch. And most of the time I'm doing this back stitch around a piece of wool that I have already stitched on or whip stitched on. And this becomes an outline stitch. There are times when I have actually done a back stitch around something and found that it wasn't heavy enough or I couldn't see it enough. And so I might grab another color of thread and weave it through.
Oh.
And it gives you kind of a fun look.
Yeah.
So I've just done a back stitch here. And let's get another thread. Let's get this one because it's a little fatter. You can also use more decorative threads. You could use a little thin yarn, or you could use something sparkly or anything, kind of a novelty thread to do the whipping with. So you have your basic line of back stitch, and then you bring up your other thread, or it could be the same thread, and you're just going to whip it. So I'm going to go, usually I like to go from the outside towards me, and I'm just whipping it through each one of those stitches. And don't pull it too
because there's
tight.
quite often you don't see your back stitch after you've gone around.
And there you have a little stronger line and a more decorative line.
I like that.
You can do this stitch also with a lot of different things. For instance, if you've done a chain stitch, And you can do the same thing. You can go back. Let's do it with this one. Maybe I have one right on there. Now it's warm in here. It was cool a minute ago. So I'm going to whip it with this more colorful thread, but I can do it the same way with a chain stitch or even other stitches where I'm wrapping it or whipping it. See?
It's cute.
Makes it just a little more bold. Gives it a little bit different look. It kind of gives it a ropey look if you do it in a contrasting color. Those are the 4, is that 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 stitches. Did I miss any? Star stitch, trellis, turkey, weed area. Nope, I did them all. So have you ladies done any of your houses or have any questions about your houses? One other thing, did I mention these? Did I mention these?
No.
When I do classes twice, you know, sometimes I forget which class I told everything to. These are Spoke Easy, and Sue Spargo also produces these. And you can see this one has 5 spokes. There's one with 6. This one's, I think, 8. There's probably 7. But what you do with these is you put them, and then using a pencil or maybe a white pencil, then you can mark the spokes so they're perfectly symmetrical. The only problem we found with these is that it's difficult to get a regular pencil in. Maybe if you have it really sharp, but there are some mechanical pencils that won't fit in there. So just be aware of that. But she does have these that some people have enjoyed using. And I think that's all for that, unless you have questions about your houses specifically for this month. And we'll say goodbye to the people who are watching. And if you have questions, let us know here at Corn Wagon. Thanks so much for joining us.